I've audited 20 plus AI sales stacks over the last 2 years. From every sales stack, I'm mostly referring to their tech stacks and how it works within their sales infrastructure. If you ever signed off on an AI contract and 6 months later wondered where the hell the money went, this video is for you. Stable bot subscriptions bleed margins. MIT just dropped a report not too long ago where 95% of enterprise AI pilots are reaching zero P&L impact. Here's what the 5% actually got right. You see, Airtable, 11x, everyone is killing their pilots because of hallucinations, bad data, zero meetings booked. Today, I'm walking through the exact audit I teach and run that uncovers leaks within a business, within pretty much every stack that I look at. So if you're interested in this, highly recommend sticking to the end. I've got some treats for you. So if you don't know me, my name is Jonathan McLemore. I run Plinko Solutions. We build and teach how to produce real agentic workflows and agentic orchestrators that impact real business revenue. So that's everywhere from tax firms, sourcing prospects, mid-market sales floors, production deployments. I help drive real tangible change by, instead of giving you another subscription, we work primarily on, hey, if this thing helps you, then it's a win-win situation. Last year, I helped one 14-rep team go from 600 calls a day to 900 without adding a single hire. And I'll show you exactly how later in the video. The only reason that worked is because I ran this audit first. So let me tell you about that team. Tax firm, 14 reps across 3 different teams. They had decent margins, solid book of business, well established within their full city, but their pipeline was really at that ceiling. And the board was looking at how can we explore, especially in this new world with all this AI stuff, what can we do to push the horizons? They've already deployed a bunch of tools. They've tried out, stronger lead enrichment, pouring another $500 a month tool, AI copy, AI scoring, the whole catalog, and it wasn't working. So I ran this audit, and here's what I found. The issue is not a lack of tools or lack of resources. They had plenty of that. The issue was a broken operating system between task management, automation, and rep execution. It was more about the people and process than it was the technology. None of the AI was actually really the problem. It was the plumbing underneath. So what we did, thoroughly on my end, was after 84 automations, well, during, I won't say after, we tightened the workflows between Monday.com, their CRM, and using Make.com, which is an automation tool. The activity went from 600 calls a day to about 900. Roughly 50% more outbound volume. So no new headcount, no new subscription tool, same software, different way of configuring it so that you have more amplification, not just automation, right? So we'll get into that. The goal isn't to replace these reps or replace their efforts. The goal is to hand them 40 prospects before they open their laptop. They actually have time to sell, right? So instead of, lo and behold, when you give them an overflow of resources, they can only build a boat so many ways. But when you give them the engineering and the combination of design and automation, you move that boat a little further, a little faster. So here's the framework. This isn't anything novel. This is merely borrowing from what works, right? So the framework, as I like to token it, is a 3-pass audit. Every pass ends with the same 3 outputs: what to cut now, what to fix in 30 days, and what to scale if it's actually moving the pipeline. So you're not just leaving with a list of complaints, you're leaving with a plan. If you'd like support while running this audit on your own tech stack and your own sales work, link in description, book a call, we'll see if we're a good fit. So we do at Plinko Solutions, we either teach or give you the reins yourself. So we walk you through how each of these passes work. Pass 1, revenue. So mapping the full path from inbound, the first point of touch, all the way to outbound activity, which is then actual meetings, talking to people. That goes from lead source, enrichment, scoring, routing, messaging, handoff, CRM being able to write itself, and reporting, right? That's 8 different stages. AI is plugged into all of them right now. When AI is plugged into all of them, most teams have no idea which plug is actually, supposed to go where. Then it's hard to tell when these meetings actually do show up, where do they come from? So I like to trace that stage by stage. And the question I ask at every stage is pretty much the same. Does the tool, the automation, the thing that's technically enabling this, actually improve or lead to higher quality meetings, conversion rates? Does it actually aid in speed to lead or visibility, right? If the answer isn't a clear yes, it goes into the nice demo, weak business case bucket. That bucket is usually bigger than most people think. And that's back to our old philosophy of failing fast to really see, does this thing actually move the needle? Pass 2, cost. I'm looking for unused licenses, overlapping tools across departments, bloated workflows, expensive models calling on low value or low critical work, agent systems solving Ferrari problems for a golf cart task. If you could imagine a workshop where every department has bought their own hammer because nobody is checking the tool wall, that's what most enterprise AI sales stacks look like right now. One team, one department bought theirs, right? Sales bought theirs, marketing got their own, customer success has their own set of tools, and nobody compared notes. Pass 3, risk. Looking at where prospect or customer data actually touches language models, which vendors are actually storing and retaining it, who has access, what is happening outside of these approved systems, and whether leadership actually has any visibility into how these things are really being used. This is the one that most leaders avoid because it gets uncomfortable, right? Most directors don't treat this as a top concern because if you're in a regulated space or your customer contracts have data of residency requirements, this becomes a higher priority task. So now here's the diagnostic. You can score yourself right while you're watching this. Pull up all your AI line items, all the subscriptions you might have. For each tool, answer a question. Is this tool clearly improving a number or metric that you can track? 2, is the tool the cheapest tool that could do the job? And that's a qualitative question, requires deep research. 3, do you know exactly where your data goes when this tool runs? If you have more than 3 tools where the answer to any of those are no, you need an audit. That's the floor. Anybody under that, you're probably fine for now. So now you know what the framework is. The part that most directors stumble on is where each pass actually breaks down in real life. So that's next. All right, so now let me show you where each of these actually break down. This is the part where most directors get scared when I walk them through it. So ZoomInfo and Airtable both canceled their 11x pilots. Why? Hallucinating, bad data, AI generated outreach stuff that didn't really sound like humans. So they pulled the plug. And the reason that happened is because AI was layered on top of a bad foundation, right? AI on top of bad data just gives you bad outputs, amplified faster. So AI on top of clean, fresh, high intent, high signal data, that's what actually moves the pipeline. So when I run the revenue pass, the first thing I do is not the AI and the necessary technical tooling itself, but what is that technical tooling enabling, right? It's the data underneath that AI. Let me show you what good looks like. Same tax firm I told you about earlier. Once we fixed that, really one of those core pieces around how they were rescheduling follow-ups, instead of them going after a call, going on their calendar, clicking create event, creating the invite for themselves, or not even just throwing it into their calendar, that whole rigmarole. Instead, give them a column that once they put in a date, make.com automatically figures out their time zone, as well as a few other pieces of scripting, and gave them a calendar invite already into their calendar just by telling in a column. Another really cool revenue opportunity that we did for them is an automatic sourcing engine. So this one is really cool. So once that automation for follow-ups are in place, I noticed that they had 2 virtual assistants that were actively sourcing leads for them. And what they would do is they go on these government websites and they would source federal tax lien notices, and they would do this from California, UCC. Once I caught that they had that lead sourcing going on, I thought we could feed it better targets and also quicker, right? Speed to lead was really the name of the game here. What the virtual assistants were doing is they would pull federal tax lien notices from California UCC search, NYC ACRIS, and a few other ones that would run twice a day. They would then take that structured output, feed it into a Google Sheet, which would then be synced to a sales board on their monday.com for the sales director to review and then pass on to the team. That's what an engine looks like in production. Before this existed, the team was buying lists, right? Stale data, low intent, reps spending hours every week on manual research. After this existed, the reps came in and they have a full flow, which on top of their virtual assistance flow, this one was the most recent, right? Because things take time. And because of that, we were able to give them high intent targets that then, with that better sourcing, led to a lot of upstream revenue. I'll give you one more example. Medicare voice agent bill I worked on about a year ago. The metric that mattered here was throughput. We had, most of the people calling for Medicare were above the age of 60, and they would have to wait 2 to 4 hours. And so most of them would hang up and try another day. Because of that, throughput was around 46% for people that called and then hanged up. We then moved that number to 79%. Why? Because I treated it like an operations audit, not another technical exercise. So I mapped where the workflow was breaking. I was able to pull their transcripts from the system, and based on the ones that did pick up, how angry they were, where they would fall off, where they would continue. And because it was inbound, we had a lot of data. So I was able to take that handoff logic, feed it into a voice agent on retail where humans were being forced to repair work. The agent then was able to come in and handle the conversations calmly and quickly, right? So because of that, they didn't really mind talking to an AI because it got them where they needed. That works in a case like this. Very rare for a voice agent. That's pass one when it's done right. AI works because everything else around it also works first, right? We don't just plug it in and hope it spreads joy. There needs to be that synchronized, call it unity, which is a lack of a better word, but just things happen to already work. And they don't just happen, of course, it's by design. Anyway, pass two. This is the leak I was speaking about. So the biggest leak isn't a tool. It's really structural, right? It's political power within an organization. And I know most companies don't want to hear that, right? Sales bought their tool, marketing got theirs, customer success has their own tools, RevOps, they have their own. And you end up with 3 different vendors doing 80% of the same job at 3 different price points with 3 different sets of admin overload, having to then figure out how much these things are actually costing these departments. So instead of signing off and approving all 3 of them separately, 6 months apart, because nobody's tracking or anything in an actual timeline, there's a silent killer, caching costs, right? So for example, if you're running on an API like Anthropic's, every time an agent compacts a live session, you get charged for that cache rewrite. I covered that a bit more in my previous videos. Other models don't always operate that way, right? So if you're running multi-agent systems with long context windows, you're bleeding tokens that you really didn't budget for. I've seen workflows that the cost were 40% of the total spend, and the customer had no idea. So that, you would assume, would be free 99 if you understood kind of how these things work. But because you don't have time to dive into all the technical know-how under the hood, one of the things that we do within an audit isn't to negotiate down, it's to consolidate. Pick the one that does the job best, cut the other ones, route the workflows from the dead tools into the surviving one, and just like growing plants, don't keep dead leaves around. Just do there's a word for this, not my area of expertise, but if you are into plants, you know what I'm talking about. Connect not the roots, but you can tie things together and it'll grow. That's what we're trying to do here, propagate. Right? I think that's the one. Quality usually goes up because of this, because the data all now lives in the same environment. Number 3, here's the number I told you about. Microsoft Work Trend Index. 78% of your employees are using AI tools you didn't sanction. Of those, 77% are copy-pasting data into chatbots, and 22% of those copy-paste include personal identifiable information or payment information sometimes. So read that again. Of every 5 reps, 1 of them takes the information that is proprietary, feeds it into ChatGPT, and 1 of those contains a PII or PCI, right? It's not a survey trick, that's a real number. Samsung learned this the hard way back in 2023. The engineers pasted semiconductor source code into ChatGPT 3 separate times in 1 month. That code got submitted to OpenAI servers. Lo and behold, they lost control of it. So when I run the risk pass, I'm looking for shadow AI. The unsanctioned tools your team is touching that nobody on the leadership team has any visibility to. I know we're encouraging people to experiment, but day one, when it comes to risk audits, I'm not looking at running a survey. People lie on surveys, right? I start with identity, endpoint, browser, and spend data. So in a Microsoft environment, I want to review Entra sign-ins, M365 audit activity, Defender app discovery if it's available. I'll look at browser extension inventory and any mismatch between approved apps and what users are actually touching. So if you're looking to actually empower your team, guess what? Ownership is the best way to do that, like any other form of technical leadership. When you look for unsanctioned, app logins or strange grants or personal email behavior and AI tool domains appearing outside of that approved world, it's worth looking into. Cross-check that with finance, because shadow AI usually leaves 2 trails: usage and spend. So depending on the size of your corporation, you can track this through corporate spending, expense claims, department software purchases, and being able to see if within that, are people individually spending on tech and how are they using that within their work. So when I go through this, I build a table, 5 columns: tool, users, data touched, current risk level, and immediate action. This turns a vague, we think people are using AI to do their work, to an actual remediation plan that you can hand to your CISO or CFO in the same meeting. Just to be clear, this is extreme monitoring. Most businesses don't need to go this deep. So if you're audit bound, contract bound, and your industry has any data residency rules, and you feel that this is, a bit too much, guess what? This is the floor, not the ceiling. This is where you start. So now you know where each pass failed. The part that comes next is what to do when a vendor walks in your door trying to sell you another AI tool, because all of this gets undone in 6 months if you sign the wrong contract. So I actually created a free guide for this that has a full audit kind of checklist and walkthrough over in the school community. Free 99 for the first 500 members. Within that, you'll have a field guide that you can walk through and actively work with, the diagnostic questions I'll be covering here, and all the different kind of assets you need to get started. So again, you can run this on your own stack this week by feeding it in and talking to an LM, and you get to actually map some stuff. And honestly, I really enjoy creating this, and I've been using it in my live events that I've been running every weekend, and it's cool to use live. So anyways, enough about that. If you're interested, again, link in the description. Let's get back to it. All right, so you've run the audit, you've cut what isn't working, you've consolidated, you've locked down your shadow AI for visibility. That fixes today. The question is, how do you stop ending up here in 6 months? And the answer is you stop assigning bad contracts. You don't need another stable bot subscription. Here are the 5 questions, not verbatim, but essentially what I aim to get from any sort of vendor or partnership call, any sort of new software. And if the rep can't answer this cleanly, well, you have your answer. And again, this depends on how regulated or how strict of an environment is that you work in. So it'll vary a little bit. Number 1, can you show me a live cost breakdown of a X number here run, right? So you have an idea of usage. So in this instance, you would insert an idea that you would aim to use the tool for and ask them based on usage and spend, because that's usually how most tools are charging, what does that cost look like? Most people do this intuitively, but it's good to have as a top of the list so you actually know, you can envision yourself in the vehicle, all right? Number 2, and this especially matters if you're more on the technical side, which integrations are available, right? In terms of connecting to either Claude Cowork, OpenClaw, Hurries, webhooks. If you're familiar with how to connect different tools from API to API, you want to ensure that's a possibility, especially on the payment plan that you're looking at. Some tools reserve that for a more higher plan, so they kind of separate it as a feature. And if you're building with these things, especially in the open source world, like you should, then these things matter, right? If you can wire a tool to all your other tools on the tech stack, it's just that much more powerful. Number 3, who owns the data? Right, so this is a privacy question, again, with regulation. You want to ensure that, especially if it's a proprietary revenue agent that they're providing for you on a stable bot subscription, are they training that bot on your work? Or if they are, to what extent? What are the privacy policies in that? And how does that work in terms of canceling? Do they just keep all the data that you gave them? Especially in the mid-market, would clients have long sales cycles. If you end up switching the vendors after 6 months, you can't afford to lose some of the work that you've done. So if you do leave or you cancel a plan, if it just deletes everything about you, that can hurt. Number 4, what does customer support or incident response look like when there's updates, right? So if they're relying on a GPT 5.4 or an OpenClaw kind of background infrastructure that gets updated every other day, or every other week, how does that impact the uptime for the stuff that you're doing, right? Because if you have it and it's working as an active sourcing engine or a prospecting engine or an enriching engine, which if you're interested, there's a whole slew and list of them on blinkosolutions.com. There's a difference between selling you the actual running of the machine, which a lot of people are doing. You're kind of like renting out your AI versus owning it. I would suggest owning it is the most cost-effective and highest leverage effective way to do it, which is why the customer support and all these pieces are important, because if you're renting it out the same way you'd expect your landlord to take care of the pipes, it's not too different here. Number 5, do you have any example customers like me? Usually, if they're a good business in the mid-market world, they'll have examples of case studies. And if they're smart, they'll anchor to them early in the call. So every vendor has a glowing demo. You need proof that the example that you have actually moves the metric that your clients report upstream. So is that booked meetings, qualified pipeline, revenue per X amount of time, right? So asking for a reference call or a similar ideal customer profile will help you end up in the most probable, enjoyable outcome. That last one is kill it, because every vendor does have a great demo. Few have monitoring, rollback, and a real answer to ROI. So when the reps start hand waving on that one, you know the rest of the call is really just theater. So here's what to walk away with. The 3-pass AI audit, revenue, cost, and risk. 3 outputs every time that matter, cut the ones that don't, and you'll see results within the next 30 days. Scaling before it's actually moving the pipeline will lead to 5 times the problem in those 30 days. So run those questions deeply, spend the time to, again, amplify, not just plug in automation and forget it. You don't want these AI agents to replace any sort of human behavior. You want them to hand off meaningful work after the kind of monotony of clicking and dragging and filtering and categorizing. The stuff that doesn't really require a lot of cognitive load, I would encourage you to reserve your time and explore what real results look like. You have infinite time when you get your time back from your machine. Say that again, because this is a quote from Y Combinator.
You could have infinite time by borrowing the time from the machines.
So if that resonated with you, link in the description. I'll see you out there.